Tonight, we're digging into the case file of one of literature's most brilliant and, frankly, most baffling minds. You see, this is the man who gave us the world's greatest detective, a true master of cold, hard logic. But this same man was hiding something, a passionate belief in a world that seemed to defy everything his famous creation stood for. Think about it. On one side, you've got Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the meticulous brain behind Sherlock Holmes. You know, the guy whose whole deal was, once you've eliminated the impossible, whatever is left, no matter how wild it sounds, must be the truth. But then, on the other side, you have the exact same man who was this passionate, unwavering champion of spiritualism. A guy who poured his own money and his reputation into proving that ghosts, spirits, and yep, even fairies were real. So, how does that even work? How can one person be both of these things? Was he this master of logic who just kind of lost the plot? Or did that same brilliant detective's mind actually lead him to conclusions that the rest of us just weren't ready for? Well, that's the mystery we're diving into. To really get a handle on the believer, you have to start with the logician. Because Doyle's greatest creation, Sherlock Holmes, he didn't just appear out of thin air. Nope. He was born from Doyle's own training in a world of cold, hard facts. See, when he was a young medical student, Doyle worked as an assistant for Dr. Joseph Bell. And this guy was the real-life Sherlock Holmes. Dr. Bell was famous for these just astonishing deductions. He could just glance at a patient and figure out their job, where they were from, even what they'd been up to recently, all from these tiny little details like a callus on a thumb or a certain type of mud on their boot. For Doyle, this wasn't magic. It was a science. It was a method of observation that he would later make world famous. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn. As Doyle's fame as a writer exploded, his own personal passion shifted dramatically. He turned that same sharp, analytical mind away from solving fictional crimes and pointed it directly at what he believed was life's single greatest mystery. And listen, this wasn't some casual hobby for him. Doyle saw his work in spiritualism as the absolute most important thing he would ever do, way more important than any Sherlock Holmes story he ever put to paper. He wasn't just exploring an idea, he was on a mission. So, what was this mission all about? Spiritualism. Now, to understand why he was so drawn to this, you have to remember the time he was living in. The world was in the shadow of the Great War, a conflict that had taken millions of lives, including Doyle's own son. You had an entire generation that was grieving, just desperate for some kind of proof that their loved ones weren't truly gone forever. Spiritualism offered that hope. It offered a direct line to the world beyond. And this conviction, it would lead Doyle into some of the most fascinating friendships you can imagine. And none was more bizarre than his relationship with the world's greatest escape artist, Harry Houdini. In Houdini, Doyle found his ultimate sparring partner, a master of illusion going head-to-head with a master of belief. Doyle was completely and utterly fascinated by Houdini. He looked at this man who seemed to just defy the laws of physics and saw a deep contradiction. Here was a guy who publicly debunked fake mediums, but Doyle was convinced there was something deeper going on, something he believed was a genuine hidden power. I mean, Houdini was a total puzzle. Publicly, he was on this crusade against fake psychics, but in private, he was a walking contradiction. He was incredibly generous. He once bought 500 pairs of shoes for barefoot kids he saw on the street. He even admitted to Doyle that this little voice inside his head told him exactly how to pull off his impossible escapes. And get this, after debunking hundreds of faked spirit photos, he quietly told Doyle he thought just one was actually real. This whole strange friendship really came to a head with this medium who went by Marjorie. Houdini was dead set on proving she was a fraud, so he builds this foolproof box, sealed up with 8 padlocks to trap her in, but when the seance started, something completely bizarre happened. The entire front of the box just blew off. Houdini had no explanation, and this, of course, just made Doyle even more convinced. This led Doyle to a really incredible theory. What if Houdini wasn't a magician at all? What if he was actually the most powerful psychic on the planet, performing real paranormal feats, but just disguising them as tricks so he wouldn't be persecuted like other mediums were? To Doyle, it was the only explanation that made any logical sense. But Houdini was just one file in a much, much bigger cabinet.
Doyle started applying his detective's brain to countless other unexplained events, putting together a casebook that reads like a supernatural version of Sherlock Holmes.
So let's open up one of these case files. This one takes us all the way to a sealed family tomb in Barbados, back in the early 1800s. And this mystery was so weird, it eventually got the island's governor involved. The sheer impossibility of this is what really hooked Doyle. Just try to picture this. This tomb is sealed shut, right? But every time they open it up for another burial, the massive, super heavy lead coffins inside are just thrown all over the place like toys. So finally, the governor steps in. He has the floor covered in a layer of fine sand to catch any footprints, and then he seals the door with his own official seal. A year later, they open it. The seal is perfect. The sand is totally smooth, not a single footprint. But inside, the coffins are in total chaos again. For Doyle, this was undeniable proof of forces beyond our world.
But if you think that's wild, nothing, and I mean nothing, tested people's opinion of Doyle more than the case of the Cottingley fairies. He became the world's most famous defender of these photographs, taken by two little girls, that they claimed were 100% real proof of fairies.
Now, most people just laughed these photos off as a pretty obvious hoax, but not Doyle. He studied them with scientific rigor. He was convinced they were genuine evidence of a hidden dimension, a world of elemental beings just outside our own perception. And he argued that just dismissing them without a real investigation was just closing your mind to all the possibilities of the universe. So, after looking at all this evidence, from Houdini's secrets to flying coffins and fairies in a garden, what are we supposed to make of this guy's incredible journey? It's been more than 71 years since Doyle published his major works on the paranormal, but his approach is still really compelling, because he didn't just blindly believe. He investigated. He demanded evidence. He analyzed testimony. He tried to apply the same logic he gave Sherlock Holmes to the great mysteries beyond. And that brings us right back to our big question: the detective or the dreamer? Maybe the answer is that he wasn't one or the other. Maybe he was a man whose definition of possible was just a whole lot bigger than ours. Maybe he was a detective who, after eliminating every natural explanation, was brave enough, or maybe foolish enough, to decide that the improbable must be the truth. The case, as they say, remains open.